Scholars at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem undertake the painstaking work of piecing together bits of ancient biblical scrolls found in a mountain cave near the Dead Sea.
The so-called Damascus Document, or Damascus Rule, is certainly one of the most enigmatic ancient texts ever discovered. Who really wrote it? And what hidden narrative does it convey? All speculation aside, there is much to learn from the Damascus Rule about the organization of the sect, whatever their composition. Of course, we zoom in on the teacher of righteousness himself. There is certainly great adoration lavished upon the illustrious teacher by the ancient Hebrew text. He must have been adored to the point of being worshipped by his loyal flock, and his personal magnetism appeared sufficient to imprint a new vision and identity on the desert congregation. Again and again, we have to stress that these scrolls were not written in a vacuum. They reflect real geopolitical events taking place all around. History tells us that the Judean leader known as Jonathan the Hasmonean, or the Maccabee, and sometimes identified as the wicked priest, was kidnapped by a devious Syrian general named Tryphon. Even though a king's ransom was delivered up to procure his release, Jonathan was treacherously murdered and the money kept. Jonathan's surviving brother, Simon, now took the helm. The body was returned to the town of Modi'in, where his father Mattathias had first begun the Maccabean revolt. There in Modi'in, a beautiful monument was erected in his honor. The Damascus Rule seems to allude to these events, citing Deuteronomy 32:33. Chamat taninim yenam verosh patanim achzar. The Dead Sea text comments, Rosh haptanim hu rosh malachei Yavan, haba'al la'asot bahem nakama. The description in the scrolls fits the renegade Syrian general Tryphon, who saw to it that Jonathan the Hasmonean, assuming him to be the one who slew the beloved teacher, received his just deserts. But what about the leadership of the sect after the passing or murder of the teacher of righteousness? We are told that the mantle of authority is taken up by one known as the mevaker, generally translated as the bursar or overseer of the community. The overseer builds his own authority on that of the teacher. וזה סרח המבקר למחנה, ישכיל את הרבים במעשה אל, ויבינם בגבורות פלאו, ויספר לפניהם נהיות עולם בפרטיה, וירחם עליהם כאב לבניו. The overseer believes that while the teacher has gone away for now, the time is coming when he shall return in the form of the priestly Messiah, the anointed one of Israel. It isn't reincarnation per se that the overseer teaches, but he strongly believes that the spirit of the teacher will live on, and that the priestly Messiah of the end of days will express the essence of the teacher's life and character. This form of what we might call reincarnation seems to have gained popularity in the folklore of the people of Israel. And just as many in Israel imagine that Elijah will be reincarnated, so to speak, as the forerunner of the Messiah, the Dead Sea sect seems to have believed that the teacher of righteousness will someday return in the form of the priestly Messiah. In the meantime, the organization of the sect was obviously central to their survival. If those who identify the sect as Essene are correct, Then we can supplement the clues from the scrolls with the writings of Josephus, who describes communities of Essenes being linked together by an elaborate system of couriers and emissaries, apostles of sorts. They would presumably travel the dusty roads of Roman Judea, bearing messages, both written and verbal, and teaching from one sectarian center to the next. Special stores of supplies and foodstuffs would be laid up for these traveling apostles so that they had no need to carry money or other provisions with them. Whenever they would enter a town, they would simply seek out those of the sectarian persuasion who were obliged to house and feed them. Josephus puts it like this: "They have no one certain city, but many of them dwell in every city. And if any of their sect come from other places, what they have lies open for them, just as if it were their own. And they go into such as they never knew before, as if they had been ever so long acquainted with them. For which reason they carry nothing at all with them when they travel into remote parts, though still they take their weapons with them for fear of thieves. Accordingly, there is in every city where they live one appointed particularly to take care of strangers and to provide garments and other necessaries for them." Hercule Poirot here. In dispatching these emissaries, we have a possible parallel with the later behavior of Jesus of Nazareth, who dispatches his disciples saying, "I send you out as lambs in the midst of wolves. Carry no purse, no bag, no sandals, and salute no one on the road. Whatever house you enter, first say, 'Peace be to this house.' And if a son of peace is there, your peace shall rest upon him. But if not, it shall return to you. And remain in the same house, eating and drinking what they provide. For the laborer deserves his wages." Luke 10:3-7. Could Jesus, as a Jewish sage with his own sectarian movement, have been copying the techniques used by the Essenes in establishing their communities across Judea? Remember, history never develops in a vacuum, and even Jesus of Nazareth behaved according to the expectations of his day and time. "Ve'im machanot yeshvu keserech haaretz, ve'lakchu nashim, ve'holidu banim, ve'hitalchu al pi haTorah, uchemishpat hayisurim keserech haTorah." This correlates well with the following testimony from Josephus regarding the Essenes. "There is another order of Essenes who agree with the rest as to their way of living, but differ from them in the point of marriage, as thinking that by not marrying, they cut off the principal part of human life." We still ask, how must the celibate ones have gotten along with the family-oriented sectarians during those years away from their desert headquarters? It is a matter of conjecture. In any case, the heart of the Damascus Rule has to do more than anything with laws and ordinances. It is, after all, a legal code, laying out a Jewish yet sectarian system of jurisprudence, in which judges were to serve from the age of 25 to 60. As the scrolls record, "Ad asara anashim brurim min ha'edah, lefi ha'et arba'a lematei Levi ve'aharon, u'me'Yisrael shisha mevunanim b'sefer ha'hagi u've'yisudei habrit." It is fitting to point out that no trace of the Book of Meditation or of the constitutions of the covenant has ever been found. It is one of the many mysteries surrounding this ancient cache of documents.
Whoever has murmured against the authority of the community shall be expelled.
As might be expected in a document focusing on the Zadokites, priests were especially prominent in the community and were tasked with seeing to it that a strict regimen of rules was followed. We read in the text, "V'zeh serech moshav hamachanot hamitalchim ba'ele b'ketz harsha'a ad amod Mashiach Aharon v'Yisrael ad asara anashim lemu'at le'alafim umeot v'chamishim v'esrot uv'makom asara al yimash ish kohen mevunan b'sefer hahagi al pihu yishku kulam." When it comes to jurisprudence and the nature of the sectarian statutes, there was certainly great stringency demanded of each member of the assembly. For example, Sabbath law was notably strict, and a good deal of Dead Sea Scroll material is concerned with it. Al hashabat lishamra kemishpata, al ya'as ish b'yom hashishi malacha, min ha'et asher yihye galgal hashemesh rachok min hasha'ar melo'o. Consider also this passage. Al yeled ish bahema b'yom hashabat, va'im tipol el bor ve'el pachat, al yakima b'shabat. The sectarians appear to have been so strict and inflexible that they are quite prepared to allow an animal to suffer rather than to do work on the Sabbath day by hauling it out. Compare this with the saying attributed to Jesus of Nazareth, "Which of you, having a son or an ox that has fallen into a well, will not immediately pull him out on a Sabbath day?" Luke 14:5. People commonly assume that Jesus had some sort of vendetta against his own religion, Judaism, and that he constantly accused its practitioners, the Pharisees, of being overly concerned with petty matters of law and legal interpretation and lacking in compassion and love. But Jesus' foes here are not the Pharisees. In fact, he agrees with the Pharisees on this issue and many others. A modicum of textual sleuthing reveals that the Pharisees had a special law called pikuach nefesh, the saving of a life. This law maintains that the most important value in Judaism is life, and that saving or preserving life supersedes every other law commanded by Moses. Even the holiest day of the year, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, must be set aside if a life is in danger. Therefore, the Pharisees ruled that an animal must be rescued from a pit in order to save its life, even on the Sabbath day.
Before I move my hands and feet, I will bless his name. I will praise him before I go out or enter, or sit or rise.
Another important aspect of Jewish law has to do with the taking of oaths. When the second of the Ten Commandments says that one must not take the name of the Lord in vain, it is referring to swearing an oath by the God of Israel. Clearly, oath-taking was an important aspect of life in ancient Israel. But the Dead Sea sect was so stringent that it forbade employing the divine name at all in an oath. One was not even to swear by the first two letters of God's name, Aleph and Lamed, or by the first two letters of the Hebrew word for Lord, Aleph and Dalet. Lo yishba v'gam ba'alef v'lamed v'gam ba'alef v'dalet ki im shvuat habanim ba'elot habrit. This in turn reminds us of what Josephus wrote about the Essenes. They are eminent for fidelity and are the ministers of peace. Whatsoever they say also is firmer than an oath. But swearing is avoided by them, and they esteem it worse than perjury, for they say that he who cannot be believed without swearing by God is already condemned. And we are reminded of the words attributed to Jesus. Again, you have heard that it was said, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths to the Lord. But I say to you, do not swear at all, but let your yes be yes and your no, no. Matthew 5:33 and 34 and 37. The same stringency is echoed in multiple matters relating to jurisprudence, given that many violations of Torah law, including Sabbath breaking, were considered capital crimes, which had to be reported to the overseer. Kol davar asher yim'al ish b'Torah, v'ra'a re'ehu, v'hu echad, im davar mavet hu, v'yadi'ehu le'enav, b'hochiach, Not surprisingly, holiness is a matter of great emphasis across the Dead Sea Scrolls, and a special level of sanctity is attached to the city of Jerusalem. Al yishkav ish im isha ba'ir hamikdash, latameh et ir hamikdash b'nidatam. The text goes on to make reference to a satanic figure called Belial or Blial, meaning without value or worthless. Elsewhere in the scrolls, Belial is identified as the angel of darkness and as the leader of the sons of darkness. Here we read, Kol ish asher yimshelu bo ruchot Belial udvar sara kamishpat ha'ov ha'yedoni yishafet.
Cursed is Belial for his contentious purpose, and accursed for his reprehensible rule, and cursed are all the spirits of his lot for their wicked purpose.
Judaism is strictly monotheistic and makes no room for an anti-God figure such as found in Christianity. But the scrolls offered testimony that in Second Temple times, a sense of religious dualism was in fact tolerated. Some speculate that the influence of Zoroastrianism from the East brought into Judaism the idea of Satan as a distinct figure of supernatural evil. A belief in this opponent of God subsequently found expression in the New Testament, in the words of Jesus and of the Apostle Paul, who queried, "What harmony is there between Christ and Belial?" 2 Corinthians 6:15. The stringency of the sect also extended to their diet. Al yishkatz ish et nafsho b'chol hachaya v'haromesh lechol v'chol hachagabim v'minehem yavo'u ba'esh o b'mayim ad hem chayim ki hu mishpat briatam. The mention of locusts also brings to mind the diet of the character known both to the Christian Gospels and the writings of Josephus as John the Baptist, whose diet consisted of locusts and wild honey. Might the famous Baptist have been in some way connected with the Qumran sectarian? In the final analysis, we can say without exaggeration that a fundamental aspect of sectarian identity was its exclusivity. They alone were the sons of light. Everyone else, including fellow Israelites, were sons of darkness. Members of the sect were to refrain from all commercial dealings with such outsiders, unless with the permission of the overseer. Ve'ish mikol ba'ei brit el al yisa, ve'al yiten livnei hashachar, ki im kaf lechaf, ve'al ya'as ish davar lemakach, ulemimkar, ki im hodia lemevaker. The overseer was likewise consulted on matters of marriage and divorce, which at the very least tells us that this segment of the Dead Sea sect was by no means celibate. As in the Torah, divorce was an acceptable practice, though in all cases the strict code of biblical law, supplemented by the many additional regulations of the sect, was to be followed scrupulously. No deviation was tolerated. ואשר לא יחזקו באלה, לא יצליחו לשבת בארץ. It's no small wonder that Solomon Schechter, when he first laid eyes on the broken fragments of this most mysterious document, was immediately impressed by the rigorous legal code it outlined. Rabbinic Judaism, as it has come down to us, is noted for its moderation and its liberality in interpreting Mosaic law. This Zadokite document, as Schechter described it, appeared to have come from a very different world than what the rabbinic sages envisioned. It took over half a century for the missing pieces of this textual puzzle, discovered in the caves of Qumran, to bring to light the true authors and the true message of this central document of the Dead Sea sect.